Hello and welcome to Media Snack live from London.
And hello from New Jersey.
Hey PJ, all good?
Hey, good. How are you?
Very well, very well. So I've been looking forward to this episode, PJ. We're going to be talking about pool-based auditing. Okay, the big gnarly subject of pool-based auditing. Pool-based auditing has been around for decades. You've presumably done more pool-based audits than you can possibly even imagine and remember, right? It's been around for decades. Many advertisers have found it hugely valuable, especially in Europe. Agencies perhaps have been less pleased with it, let's say. Maybe it's been a bit more sort of challenging with it. But things are changing, especially in this kind of dynamic market that we find ourselves in at the moment. So today we're going to talk about what actually pool-based auditing is. We're going to try and unpick some of the relative strengths and weaknesses of pool-based auditing. And as always, PJ, at the end of the session, you're going to provide 3 insights and tips that will hopefully help marketers out there to be more considered around pool-based auditing. All on today's Media Snack.
Welcome to Media Snack, the live weekly show where we unpack the important questions that you will have about media, agencies, marketing and more. If you're new to the channel, it's great to have you join us. Subscribe below to get alerts of all upcoming weekly episodes.
Right, PJ, what's our question of the week?
What happened to pool auditing?
Pool auditing. Okay, well, I'm going to start and try to unpick this, but I'm going to start with actually trying to describe what pool-based auditing actually is. So a pool audit is where a collection of advertisers provide visibility to their media pricing, okay, often anonymized. And an audit pool is where a collection of advertisers provide access to an auditor to have visibility on their media prices. Now, the idea is that then auditor is able to provide a perspective as to how strong or weak that advertiser's prices are relative to the marketplace. Okay, that's what pool-based auditing is. Now, I would imagine that, you know, when it started because advertisers wanted to have an independent, objective perspective on where their prices were. You know, they'd go to their agency or they'd go to their media owner and ask them how good their prices were. The agency would say, but they're brilliant. You know, of course they're going to say they're brilliant. And the advertiser would say, okay, I get it. But having an independent perspective where that auditor could look at comparisons of other advertisers, perhaps even within the same category, and then provide a measured perspective on the relative strengths and weaknesses of that price would be really kind of effective and would be really helpful. So I suppose in the past, the answer that pool-based auditing was providing was how competitive my pricing is at any kind of moment in time, right? And so that helped, I think, in the past. But increasingly, I would imagine as an advertiser, you're not just curious about the competitive nature of your price. What you're looking for is to try and understand how you can improve those prices, how you can take that comparison and the insights of that comparison and bring it to bear to your pricing so that actually can become more effective. Okay, so that's, I think, have I covered pool-based auditing? Is that a fair description of what it is?
Yeah, that's exactly how it started, David. And those were the questions that it was designed to answer. And it's evolved over time, and people have used it in different ways. But that's what advertisers were trying to get at when they considered pooling. And of course, in its heyday, it was a simpler task because the media marketplace was a lot more linear and a lot easier to develop a like-for-like comparison. And we'll talk about this a little bit, but the marketplace has exploded, making pooling a difficult proposition.
Yeah. Okay, so help me out then, PJ. What actually happened to pool-based auditing? What are the challenges with pool-based auditing in this current, more dynamic marketplace?
Yeah, I think there's really like almost a 1-2 punch that occurred here that has affected pooling and a pool-based audit. The first punch was really around the establishment of performance-related incentive plans. It became more and more a standard feature in advertiser agency agreements, right? And so once that became really embedded in relationships, it naturally posed some very good questions about the relevance of a pool-based audit and the function it might perform within a PRIP, right?
Yeah.
Pool-based auditing is by its nature a bit of a black box. The advertiser and the agency don't know who's in that pool. So people begin to question, well, is this a relevant comparison for us? You know, is this collection of advertisers that are in this pool, are they relevant to us as an advertiser? Do they buy in a similar fashion? Do they have similar clout? Do they deploy similar negotiation tactics? Is it relevant?
Yeah.
You know, we use this analogy a lot because it's comparable, I think, to how this all plays out. And it's sort of, if you were running a 5K, right? In the US, David, we have these turkey trots. So you go run a 5K before Thanksgiving and you get in all that exercise before you eat this fantastic meal. And in a 5K, you would say, well, my goal is to run that race faster than I ran it last year.
Yeah.
My goal is not to improve my rank order in that race in my age group and go from 50 to 40 or 40 to 30. Why? Because I can't control who's in the pool. I can't control who I'm running against. What I can control is how I train for that race. If I'm able to lose some weight, if I'm able to buy some new trainers, those elements are within my control. And so that becomes more of the focus within a PRIP. So that was the first punch of the 1-2 punch, is the PRIP element of it. The second punch was really digital media. Now, because digital media introduced an explosion of data points within the analysis and made comparable references nearly impossible. And so once that happened, it made pooling immediately sort of an irrelevant concept within the digital confines. If you think about programmatic, there is no pool that can adjust for the real-time shape shifting that happens in a programmatic buy. You can't recreate in a laboratory condition the supply and demand mechanics of a real-time bidding environment. So pooling kind of became irrelevant then. So the 1-2 punch is sort of the adoption of PRIPs across the industry and the digital ecosystem.
Yeah. But what you're describing there in terms of the 1-2 punch, that they're not fads, right? They're not just trends that are going to go away. We're not going to go back to limited channel selection. We're not going to go back to only being paid by commission. So in a marketplace that is only going to get more complicated and where choices are only going to become far greater, and where advertisers, the majority of advertisers who sort of see media as a lever for growth, are looking to link their agency's performance in some way to kind of value generation. So PRIP mechanics will only become kind of more amplified and more commonplace. And if you're an advertiser and a brand leader and a media leader sitting there thinking, okay, right, I mean, traditionally it's an insurance policy. My pool-based auditing ranking is an insurance policy, right? It's telling me that I'm doing okay, but it's a fairly complicated marketplace. What should I be thinking now? If my business is still, I suppose, somewhat addicted to that as a measure, and it makes sense, and it has made sense for a number of years. What are the tips that you should be at least thinking or considering as you kind of reflect on whether it's right for you as a business or not?
The first thing that advertisers have to do is start with the question that they're trying to answer. Get real clarity on the question you're trying to answer with an audit. If the question that you're trying to answer is how competitive are our costs, it's a fair question. And so define that as the North Star of what you're trying to answer in an audit, and then make sure that you dig deep on the makeup of that pool that you're going to be compared against. Is it relevant? Ask all the questions that you think need to be answered to make sure that that's a relevant comparison set for you. If you're not getting the right answers to those questions, that should be considered a flag.
Yeah.
Also think about pool exclusions. So anything that has to be pulled out of that comparative could also inform whether that's going to be a really relevant benchmark for you. So how does it apply to OTT? How does it apply to programmatic? If those things are not in the benchmark, you do need to question whether that's a relevant comparison set as it gets to be a smaller and smaller percentage of your total media spend. And then I would also say that if you go down that path, you should think about questioning whether you have third-party verification of the size and scalability of that pool, right? Some independent measure that says this is how robust and representative this pool is of the market. What you're trying to get to there is just simply, are we talking about an Olympic-sized pool, or are we talking about a shallow kiddie pool? Like those are the types of things you need to interrogate as an advertiser.
Yeah.
So that's really, David, around, if the advertiser is thinking about it from the perspective of how competitive are our costs. But if you're alternatively thinking, well, how do we improve? That's actually a more interesting question in a lot of ways, because you're trying to think forward about what we do from here. Once the audit's complete, how do we improve our performance? Then I think you have to really dig deep and think about what's within the control of the agency. Because at the end of the day, that's what's going to really matter as to whether they can control that performance and those KPIs that are within that benchmark. And then you have to think, I think, very carefully as an advertiser about what you're doing to put the agency in the best position to succeed. So focus on the leverage points that are going to aid that negotiation. Think about it from that part of the lens. And then think through what that negotiation is going to actually feel like when the agency goes to the media owners. Is the reference to an opaque pool really going to be motivating to that media seller? And if not, think about the elements that you really need to lean into to make sure that the agency is positioned for success.
Yeah.
And then one final thought, I think, and this is important, and this is a passion of ours, is really I think about it from the perspective of developing a performance-related incentive plan that emphasizes sort of cognitive empathy. And what do we mean by that? We mean this is where you start to put yourself in the position of the agency. What's going to be truly motivating to the agency? Again, things under their control. Think about it from your perspective. Would you want your own KPIs to be transparent? Would you want to be measured on things under your control? Is it a fair analysis? Is it a robust analysis? If you think about it from the perspective of what's going to truly drive change, I think it reorients yourself around the right KPIs that are going to be truly motivating to that agency.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And do you, I mean, we've come across, advertisers that we work with that actually have PRIP mechanics linked to their pool audit score. So that essentially becomes the currency for success, right? And presumably auditors that have pools, they want to nurture and nourish that, right? There's got to be a better way of doing it.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of like the holy grail for a pool auditor, is when the PRIP is defined within their own pool, because as I said earlier, that's a black box that the agency and the client don't truly know what goes into that, but it makes their business model very sticky. Yeah. Here at ID Comms, we've been able to work with clients and sort of introduce a new change management program around value track. So comparing their performance year over year, which again, because you take it out of the black box and you focus on what the agency can control, and you hone in on their year-over-year cost performance and really work on negotiation leverage points that they can bring to market, that whole program becomes more transparent. There's a greater degree of trust. There's a greater degree of ownership. And we ultimately see, better traction, because everybody can understand exactly what we're going into the market to execute.
Yeah, and that's it, right? It's all about accountability, and it's about creating better measures to make responsible media a greater driver of business outcome. That's all any of us want, right? And so as we kind of move forward as the industry, we just perhaps need to just question the status quo and think about things in a slightly different way. But PJ, that's really helpful. Thank you very much. That's it for this week. If you have enjoyed the episode, and if you like any of the other episodes, give us a thumbs up. But on behalf of PJ and I, thank you very much, and thank you for watching.
Media Snack is brought to you each week by ID Comms, the award-winning growth consultancy specializing in media. We help advertisers on a life cycle to growth in 3 service areas: operations, partnerships, and optimization. that transform your media investments into real company growth. Whether you're planning an agency pitch, upgrading your media organization, want to learn new best practice, or simply get better performance from your media investments, you can find out more at idcomms.com/growth.